All right, y'all. We gonna break down Mark chapter 16. What is Mark chapter 16 trying to tell us? Ooh, this might be a two-parter. So, leading up to chapter 16, Jesus has been fairly. Oh no, I forgot all about that. Darn it. Okay. Jesus has been unfairly tried and executed by crucifixion. Starting in this passage, Jesus' women followers find an empty tomb but don't know what it means. Jesus' work for our salvation is done. But explaining that to his disciples will take another 40 days, Acts 1:3. And telling the world is a work that will continue until his return. The resurrection and events after are also covered in Mark 28, Luke 24, John 20 through 21, and Acts 1 verses 1 through 11. The most reliable copies of the Gospel of Mark leave the disciples where they have spent much of the story, confused and afraid. Jesus is risen, but they haven't yet accepted that. Everything after verse 9 is most likely a scribal addition, a later. All right, let's break this down. Part one. He is risen. Come on now. Jesus has finished his 3 years of ministry and training for his disciples. He has faced the cross and taken the sins of the world. Now he has risen, just as he said he would. Period. After the crucifixion, Joseph of Arimathea, Mark 15:42 through 46, and Nicodemus buried Jesus, John 19:39. They washed his body, wrapped it in linen, and placed him in a grave. Mary Magdalene and another Mary followed to see where the tomb was, Mark 15:47. They went home to prepare more spices and ointment and to observe the Sabbath, Luke 23:56. The Sanhedrin, after that Jesus' disciples was still afraid that Jesus' disciples will steal his body and claim he has risen from the dead, asked Pilate to steal the tomb, Matthew 27:62 through 66. A cord would have been wrapped around the stone and the crack filled with wax. The stone could not be moved without breaking the wax and dislodging the cord. Now that the Sabbath is over, several women come to Jesus' grave to complete the preparation. Hold on, I need to write something. The preparations Joseph and Nicodemus hastily provided. Mark mentions Mary Magdalene and Mary, mother of James the Less, and Joseph. Mark 15:40 and then verse 47. And Salome, James, and John's mother, Mark 27:56. Luke adds Joanna, Luke 24:10, and says several other women are present. It was mainly women out there. I think all women. Mark 16:1 through 3. When the women arrive on Sunday morning, they discover the stone is rolled away and the tomb is empty except for a young man in a white robe, Mark 16:1 through 8. He tells them that Jesus is risen and charges the women to tell their disciples, particularly Peter, to meet Jesus in Galilee. The women leave, telling no one on their way. Mark 16:4 through 8. The book of Mark is a story of Jesus trying to teach the disciples who he is and what he has come to do. Ironically, the most reliable manuscript finishes without the mission being completed. Jesus' disciples are in hiding, his tomb is empty, his women followers are confused and scared. But this is perhaps an appropriate ending considering what Mark has shown us about Jesus' relationship with his followers. What we think of Jesus has no bearing on who he is. We may think him to be a teacher, a future king, the source of infinite blessings, or a helpless, innocent man hanging on a cross. What he is the Son of Man from Daniel 7, who will be given dominion and glory in a kingdom with all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. Daniel 7:14. The women may not understand what has happened yet, and the disciples may not believe the news of his resurrection at first, but Jesus will patiently reveal himself to them. And through their testimonies, the world will come to hear who he is. The fact that Jesus returns and chooses these clueless, timid souls to build his church merely proves how much we need his grace-given sacrifice. While verse 8 is the end of the oldest transcript of the Gospel of Mark, less reliable manuscripts continue. Most likely, the additional verses were added as footnotes or added addendums, then accidentally included as part of the main text by a scribe. The inclusion of the extending ending of Mark does not vindicate the reliability of this gospel or the Bible as a whole. In fact, all but one phrase recorded in verse 9 through 20 is at least partially confirmed somewhere in the other three gospels or the book of Acts. John 21 through 18 states that after the women tell the disciples, Peter and John see for themselves the tomb is empty. Mary Magdalene follows them, and after they leave, she meets Jesus. Mark 16:9 through 11. Jesus sends her back to tell the disciples she has seen him, but they do not believe her. Luke includes a very much longer version of Mark 16:12 through 13, Luke 24:13 through 35. Jesus speaks with these two travelers, explaining how his ministry, death, and resurrection fit into the prophecies of the Old Testament. He even eats a meal with them. They do not realize he is Jesus until right before he vanishes. The two rush back to Jerusalem to find the 11 disciples and report what happened. The added verses briefly mentions one of the added verses briefly mentions that Jesus rebukes his disciples' unbelief. Mark 16:14. Luke says he appears in the room where they are hiding and scolds them for disbelieving the accounts of others as well as the evidence of their own eyes. Luke 24:36 through 43. John adds that Thomas is absent from this meeting, but Jesus returns and proves himself again. John 20:24 through 29. Thomas responds, "My Lord and my God." John 20 and 28. After several appearances, the disciples finally trust Jesus enough to go to Galilee, where he promised to meet them. Y'all should have been did that. Okay. Mark 28:16 through 20 covers a shortened Great Commission found in Mark 16:15. Mark 16:20 through 16. Mark chapter 16, verse 16 through 20 is not found in the other gospels, but most of the promises are fulfilled in the book of Acts. The disciples do cast out demons, Acts 19:11 through 12, speak new tongues, Acts 2:1 through 11, survive serpent bites, Acts 28:1 through 6, and heal the sick, Acts 3:1 through 10. The scriptures have no record of a disciple surviving poison, although extra biblical accounts do. The use of this passage to encourage handling snakes and drinking poison is tragic and entirely contrary to the Orthodox Christian teachings. Alright, y'all, that's all I have for part 1 of Matthew 16 breakdown. Come back for part 2.